The trading station Vayara 7 floated in the darkness between star systems like a massive silver wheel. Ships from 100 different worlds docked at its ports every day, bringing traders, diplomats, and travelers from across the galaxy. Inside its gleaming corridors, aliens of every imaginable shape walked side by side, conducting business in 1,000 languages. Jake Morrison stood in the arrival bay, trying not to stare at the creatures around him. A being made entirely of blue gas drifted past him. Something that looked like a walking tree nodded politely as it passed. Jake had seen the training videos back on Earth, but nothing prepared someone for the reality of being surrounded by actual aliens. "Mr. Morrison, please stay close." The voice came from Velcor, the spider-like alien assigned as Jake's liaison. Velcor had 8 legs, on 6 eyes, and a way of moving that made Jake's skin crawl, though he tried hard not to show it. "The station is quite safe, but humans are still new here. It is best not to wander." "Understood," Jake said. He adjusted his suit jacket, feeling out of place in formal Earth clothing while surrounded by beings who wore everything from elaborate robes to nothing at all. Dr. Linda Hayes walked beside him, her eyes bright with excitement. Unlike Jake, who was here as a diplomat, Linda was a scientist. She had spent her entire career studying alien life, though only through videos and data transmitted to Earth. Now she was finally among them. "This is incredible," Linda whispered. "That creature over there is a Metherian. They breathe ammonia. And look, a crystalline. I've read 17 papers about their biology." "Maybe focus on the meeting," Jake suggested, though he smiled. Linda's enthusiasm was infectious, even when he felt nervous enough to be sick. They were heading to the council chamber for humanity's first major trade negotiation. Earth wanted access to advanced medical technology. The Galactic Council wanted rare metals from Earth's asteroid belt. It should have been simple, but nothing was simple when dealing with dozens of alien governments, each with their own customs and laws. Velcor led them through a corridor that opened into a massive hall. Jake stopped walking, his breath catching. The space was enormous, with a ceiling that seemed to stretch up forever. Crystalline pillars rose from the floor, glowing with soft light. Hundreds of aliens filled the room, gathered in groups, talking and waiting for the ceremony to begin. "The greeting ceremony will start soon," Velcor explained. "Many species send representatives. It is considered very important to attend. You will stand with the other newcomers, and each species will be acknowledged by the council." "How long does this usually take?" Jake asked. 3 to 4 of your hours." Jake resisted the urge to groan. Linda, however, was already moving into the crowd, fascinated by everything she saw. The ceremony began with long speeches in languages Jake's translator earpiece struggled to interpret. He tried to pay attention, but his mind wandered. He noticed a group of massive reptilian creatures standing near the far wall. They had to be at least 12 feet tall, with scales that shimmered like oil on water, and wings folded against their backs. Those are the Dracoth," Velcor said quietly, noticing Jake's gaze. "Very ancient, very powerful. It is a great honor that they attend today." "They look impressive," Jake said. "Yes, but you must remember the most important rule about the Dracoth." Velcor's voice became serious, almost frightened. "If you see a Dracoth child, you must never, under any circumstances, touch it, not even to help it, not even if it is dying." Jake frowned. "Why not?" "The young ones have unstable mental powers. Physical contact from non-Dracoth causes extreme reactions. The child might kill you accidentally with its mind. Or the parents will kill you deliberately for breaking their sacred law. Many civilizations have been destroyed for harming Dracoth young, even by accident. That seems extreme. It is absolute law. The Council enforces it strictly. No exceptions, ever." Velcor's eyes fixed on Jake. "Do you understand? This is not a suggestion." "I understand," Jake said, though something about it bothered him. The ceremony continued. Jake was introduced along with 3 other human representatives. He gave a short speech about Earth's desire for peaceful cooperation, words that had been written by someone else and approved by a dozen committees. Everyone clapped politely. The sound strange because not all the aliens had hands. Afterward, during the informal gathering period, Jake found himself standing near a refreshment table, trying to figure out which foods were safe for humans. Linda was across the room, deep in conversation with a floating jellyfish creature. That was when he saw the child. It was small, no bigger than a human 5-year-old, was with golden scales that caught the light. Its wings were tiny, useless for flight, and it walked on 2 legs in an awkward toddling way. The child wandered away from the group of adult Dracoth, curious about something across the hall. Jake watched as the little creature approached a wall panel. The panel was glowing red, and Jake could see scorch marks around its edges. His engineering training kicked in immediately. That was a damaged plasma conduit. The glow meant it was overheating. It could explode any second. The Dracoth child reached toward it, fascinated by the pretty red light. "Hey!" Jake started forward instinctively, then remembered Velkor's warning. He looked around frantically. The adult Dracoth were far away, blocked by the crowd. No one else seemed to notice. The conduit began to spark. Jake looked at the child, then at the conduit, then back at the crowd of frozen aliens. Everyone who had noticed was backing away, their faces showing terror. They were going to let the child die rather than break the law. The conduit's glow intensified. The child's small hand reached closer. Jake ran. He crossed the distance in seconds, grabbed the child around its middle and pulled it away. The conduit exploded behind them with a deafening crack, sending superheated plasma across the spot where the child had been standing. The hall erupted in screams. Jake hit the ground, rolling to protect the small body in his arms. The child made a surprised chirping sound but didn't struggle. Jake could feel warmth radiating from its scales, like holding something fever-hot, but not burning. Then a shadow fell over them both. Jake looked up into the face of an adult Dracoth. The creature was massive, terrifying, with teeth like swords and eyes that glowed with inner fire. Smoke curled from its nostrils. This, Jake realized with sudden clarity, was how he was going to die. The Dracoth loomed over Jake like a living mountain. Its scales were deep crimson, darker than the child's golden ones, and each breath it took sounded like wind through a cave. The creature's claws scraped against the metal floor, leaving deep scratches in the reinforced plating. "Scarinth, no!" Linda's voice cut through the chaos, but she was too far away to do anything. Jake felt the child in his arms stir. The little creature looked up at the massive adult, then back at Jake, and made a soft, cooing sound. Its small claws gripped Jake's jacket, but gently, like a kitten holding onto cloth. On the adult Dracoth, Scarinth opened his mouth. Jake could see fire building in the back of its throat, orange and white-hot. The temperature in the hall rose 10 degrees in seconds. Aliens scattered in every direction, screaming and pushing toward the exits. Alarms began blaring throughout the station. Jake knew he should probably let go of the child and run, but his arms wouldn't obey. The little creature was trembling, frightened by the noise and confusion. Its golden eyes were wide with fear. Jake found himself holding it closer, protective instincts overriding his sense of self-preservation. "I'm sorry," Jake said, looking up at Scarinth, "but I couldn't just let your child get hurt." The fire in Scarinth's throat flickered. The massive creature tilted its head, studying Jake with an expression that might have been confusion. Long seconds passed. The child chirped again and nuzzled against Jake's chest. Slowly, carefully, Scarinth closed his mouth. The fire disappeared. The Dracoth lowered his head until his eyes were level with Jake's, so close that Jake could feel the heat radiating from his scales. "You touched Pirith," Scarinth said. His voice was deep, resonant, like thunder in the distance. "You touched my child." "Yes," Jake admitted. There was no point denying it. "I'm sorry for breaking your law, but that conduit was going to explode. Your child would have died. Many would say death is preferable to being touched by an outsider. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." The hall went completely silent. Even the alarms seemed to quiet. Linda made a sound like a strangled gasp. Velkor, who had hidden behind a pillar, let out a wail of despair. Scarinth stared at Jake for a long moment. Then, impossibly, the corners of his mouth turned up slightly. "You are either very brave or very foolish, human." Probably foolish, Jake admitted. But your kid is okay. That's what matters, right? Scarinth looked down at Pyrith, who was still clinging to Jake and showing no signs of distress. This should not be possible. When others touch Dracoth young, the children panic. Their mental powers lash out uncontrollably. They can tear minds apart without meaning to. Well, this one seems fine to me. Yes, Scarinth said slowly. Pyrith does seem fine. More than fine. Pyrith seems calm. Velcor crept out from behind the pillar, his 8 legs shaking. Lord Scarinth, this is unprecedented. In 10,000 years of records, no one has ever touched a Dracoth child without catastrophic results. Yik the human must be doing something, using some technology we don't understand. I'm not doing anything, Jake protested. I'm just holding a scared kid. A new voice spoke from the entrance to the hall. The council demands an explanation for this disturbance. Jake turned his head, still holding Pyrith, and saw a group of aliens entering. They wore elaborate robes that seemed to mark them as important. One was a crystalline being that reflected light like a prism. Another was made up of a swarm of small insects moving as one. A third looked almost human, but had skin that shifted colors like a mood ring. Scarinth straightened to his full height. Council members. My child wandered too close to a damaged conduit. This human saved Pyrith's life. By breaking the most fundamental law of galactic civilization, the crystalline being said. Its voice sounded like wind chimes. The law exists for good reasons, Scarinth. How many species have been annihilated because someone thought they could safely interact with Dracoth young? 17 civilizations, the insect swarm added. We remember them all. The law protects everyone. Jake felt Pyrith shift in his arms. The child was looking at all the angry aliens with obvious fear. Without thinking, Jake adjusted his grip, making sure Pyrith felt secure. The child relaxed immediately. Look at them, Scarinth said quietly. Pyrith has been in this human's arms for several minutes now. No mental attack, no panic, no rage. When was the last time any of you saw a Dracoth child so calm around a stranger? The council members moved closer, studying Jake and Pyrith with obvious fascination and fear. It could be a delayed reaction, the color-shifting alien suggested. The child's powers might activate at any moment. Then we should separate them immediately, the crystalline being said. No. The word burst from Jake before he could stop it. Pyrith chirped in agreement, clinging tighter. Scarinth moved between Jake and the council members. I will not allow my child to be traumatized further. Pyrith has chosen to trust this human. That is Pyrith's right. Chosen? The insect swarm buzzed with agitation. Dracoth children cannot make such choices. They lack the development. Then explain what we are witnessing, Scarinth challenged. The council members looked at each other. Linda finally pushed her way through the crowd, reaching Jake's side. She was breathing hard, her face flushed with worry and excitement. Jake, are you okay? She asked. I'm fine. The kid's fine too. Linda looked at Pyrith, her scientific mind clearly racing. This is remarkable. Scarinth, with your permission, I'd like to run some scans. Nothing invasive, just external readings. If we can understand why Jake can interact with Pyrith safely, it could change everything we know about Dracoth biology. It could also be a fluke, the crystalline council member said. One incident proves nothing. The human broke our law. There must be consequences. What consequences? Jake asked. I saved a child's life. You violated a law that has kept the peace for 10 millennia, the insect swarm replied. Your intentions are irrelevant. The law is absolute. Scarinth's eyes began to glow with inner fire again. You would punish someone for saving my child? We would enforce the law that protects all Dracoth children, the crystalline being said firmly. Without it, every species in the galaxy would think they could handle Dracoth young safely. The results would be catastrophic. Then test me, Jake said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. You say this might be a fluke. Fine, test it. Set up whatever scientific studies you need. If I can interact with Pyrith safely, consistently, then maybe your law needs to be reconsidered. If I can't, then punish me however you want. Linda stared at him. Jake, you can't be serious. Why not? Jake looked down at Pyrith, who gazed back with trusting golden eyes. If there's even a chance that this could help, isn't it worth finding out? Scarinth studied Jake for a long moment. You would risk your life for this? For a child you just met? Someone has to. The Dracoth made a sound deep in his chest, something between a growl and a purr. Perhaps humans are more interesting than I thought. The council held Jake in what they called protective custody, which felt a lot like being in a very comfortable prison. They gave him a suite of rooms in the station's guest quarters with windows overlooking the stars and food brought 3 times a day. Guards stood outside his door at all hours, not to keep him in, Velcor explained, but to keep angry aliens out. Apparently, news of what Jake had done spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Half the known civilizations wanted him executed for breaking sacred law. The other half wanted to study him like a laboratory specimen. Death threats and research proposals flooded the station's communication systems in equal measure. Linda visited every day, bringing updates and trying to keep his spirits up. On the 3rd day, she arrived with actual good news written across her face. The council agreed to a hearing, she said, sitting down across from Jake in his small living area. They're going to let you present your case. That's good, right? Jake asked. It's better than summary execution, which was option 2. Linda pulled out her datapad, scrolling through notes. I've been working with the legal team back on Earth. They're sending experts on interstellar law, but honestly, there's not much precedent for this. Nobody's ever survived touching a Dracoth child before, so there's no case law to reference. Great. Jake rubbed his face with both hands. Oti, what about Pyrith? Is the kid okay? Linda's expression softened. That's the interesting part. Scarinth has been asking about you constantly. So has Pyrith. The child apparently refuses to eat properly and keeps making sounds that Dracoth linguists say translate roughly to, "Where's the warm one?" The warm one. It's how Pyrith refers to you. Dracoth perceive the world differently than humans. They experience emotional states as temperature variations. You registered as warm, meaning safe and comforting. Jake felt something tighten in his chest. The kid misses me? It appears so, which is causing quite a stir among xenobiologists. Dracoth young don't usually bond with anyone except their birth parents, and even those bonds take months to form. Pyrith bonded with you in minutes. Before Jake could respond, the door chimed. Velcor entered, his 8 legs moving in an agitated pattern that Jake had learned meant the alien was nervous. Mr. Morrison, you have a visitor, a very important visitor. Lord Scarinth has requested an audience with you. Jake stood immediately. He's here? Now? The council has granted permission for a supervised meeting. I must warn you, however, that several council members are opposed to this. They fear Scarinth might be here to exact revenge for touching his child. I'll take that risk, Jake said. They led him to a larger room, one with reinforced walls and a ceiling high enough to accommodate Scarinth's full height. The massive Dracoth stood in the center, his crimson scales gleaming under the lights. Beside him, looking tiny in comparison, stood Pyrith. The moment the child saw Jake, it made a happy chirping sound and rushed forward on unsteady legs. Scarinth moved to stop Pyrith, then paused, watching. Jake knelt down, and Pyrith crashed into him, wrapping small arms around his neck. The child was warm, almost hot to the touch, and trembling with excitement. Hey there, little one, Jake said softly. I missed you too. Pyrith pulled back and chirped a stream of sounds. Jake's translator earpiece struggled for a moment, then rendered it as, Warm One came back. Warm One didn't leave forever. No, I didn't leave forever, Jake promised, surprised to find he meant it. Scarinth approached slowly. Up close, Jake could see that the Dracoth's eyes were ancient, filled with a sadness that seemed to weigh on him like physical chains. Thank you for seeing me, Scarinth said. I know the circumstances are difficult. It's okay. I'm just glad Pyrith is all right. That is why I am here. Scarinth settled onto the floor, folding his wings carefully. I need to explain something to you, something that few outside the Dracoth know. It may help your case before the council, but more importantly, you deserve to understand what you have done. Jake sat down as well, Pyrith climbing into his lap immediately. I'm listening. My people are dying, Scarinth said quietly. Not quickly, but inevitably. Our population shrinks with each generation. Do you know why? No. Because of our children. Because of the very law you broke. Scarinth's voice carried centuries of pain. Dracoth young are born with immense mental power but no control. In our distant past, before we learned to isolate them, our children would accidentally kill dozens of people before they learned restraint. Whole communities would be devastated. That's terrible, Jake said, holding Pyrith a little closer. So we developed strict protocols. Only birth parents, bonded from the moment of hatching, can safely interact with the young. Everyone else must keep their distance. The children grow up alone, seeing no one but their mother and father, until they are old enough to control their abilities. Usually around 10 years of age. Linda, who had been allowed to observe the meeting, spoke up. That's an incredibly isolated way to grow up. Yes, Scarinth agreed. It damages them psychologically. Many Dracoth never fully recover from the loneliness of their childhood. They struggle to form connections, to trust, to love. This makes finding mates difficult. Raising children becomes a duty filled with fear rather than joy. So fewer of us choose to have young. Our numbers decrease. But the law protects them, Velcor interjected from his position by the door. Without it, Dracoth children would kill indiscriminately. Would they? Scarinth looked at Jake and Pyrith. Or have we been solving the wrong problem for thousands of years? Jake was beginning to understand. You think the isolation makes it worse? I know it does. Dracoth children lash out because they are frightened and alone. Their mental powers react to the fear and hostility they sense from everyone around them. But Pyrith senses no fear from you, no hostility. Your mind is quiet in a way we have never encountered before. Humans don't have mental powers, Linda explained. We're basically invisible on the psionic spectrum. Exactly, Scarinth said. And because Pyrith cannot sense the usual threatening thoughts that make children panic, Pyrith remains calm. For the first time in recorded history, a Dracoth child feels safe with someone outside the family. Pyrith yawned, showing tiny, sharp teeth, and curled up in Jake's lap like a cat. Within moments, the child was asleep. This is unprecedented, Velcor whispered. This is hope, Scarinth corrected. If humans can interact with our young safely, it changes everything. Our children could have teachers, friends, normal childhoods. They could grow up healthy and whole. Our species could have a future again. Jake looked down at the sleeping child in his lap, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. What do you need from me? The council hearing is in 2 days. They will decide your fate and the fate of any future human-Dracoth interactions. I need you to help me convince them that the old law, while well-intentioned, is killing us slowly. I need you to show them that there is another way. How? By accepting my request. I want you to become Pyrith's guardian. Temporarily, under controlled conditions, with full monitoring. If you can care for Pyrith successfully for 6 months, it will prove that humans can safely handle this responsibility. 6 months is a long time, Jake said carefully. It is a blink of an eye compared to the millennia my people have suffered. Scarinth's eyes glowed with emotion. I am asking you to help save my entire species, Jake Morrison. I am asking you to do what no one else in the galaxy can do. I care for my child and show us all that the future does not have to be as lonely as the past. Jake looked at Linda, who nodded encouragement. He looked at Velcor, who seemed terrified but said nothing. Finally, he looked down at Pyrith, peaceful and trusting in sleep. Okay, Jake said. I'll do it. The council chamber was nothing like Jake had imagined. It was circular, with seats rising in tiers around a central platform where he now stood with Pyrith beside him. Hundreds of aliens filled the seats, representing dozens of species, all watching him with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Scarinth stood to one side, formally presenting his request. Linda sat in the observers section, nervously tapping her fingers against her datapad. 2 other humans had arrived from Earth the day before. Dr. Karen Phillips was a child psychologist with 20 years of experience, and Lieutenant Chris Baker was a security officer sent to make sure Jake stayed safe. The Crystalline Council member, who Jake had learned was called Illuminar, spoke first. Its voice echoed through the chamber like music. This council has reviewed the incident and Lord Scarenth's unprecedented request. We must now hear arguments for and against this proposed trial period. A new alien stood, one Jake hadn't seen before. It resembled a praying mantis but was the size of a horse, with multiple arms and compound eyes that reflected light in disturbing patterns. I am Rixtal, representative of the Vexari hive mind. We oppose this madness strongly. On what grounds? Scarenth asked, his voice controlled but edged with fire. On the grounds of reality and history, Rixtal replied. 17 civilizations have been destroyed because they believed they could safely interact with Dracoth Young. 17. Each one thought they were special, that they had found the secret. Each one was reduced to ashes and ruins. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. This human's single success means nothing, Rixtal continued. It could be coincidence, a temporary anomaly, or a delayed reaction waiting to manifest. Allowing this experiment puts not only the human at risk but everyone on this station. If the child loses control, hundreds could die. Jake felt Pyrith press closer to his leg. The child understood enough to know it was being talked about, even if it couldn't follow all the words. The human also broke our most sacred law, added another council member, the insect swarm that called itself the Collective. Regardless of outcome, there must be consequences for such violations. If we excuse this, what message does that send? That laws can be ignored if results seem positive? Scarenth stepped forward. You speak of law and consequences, but you ignore context. The law exists to protect Dracoth children from harm. Jake Morrison's actions did exactly that. He prevented harm. Punishing him for following the spirit of the law while technically breaking its letter is absurd. The law has no spirit, Illuminar said. It has only words. Those words are clear. No one touches Dracoth Young, ever. For any reason. Then perhaps the words need to change, Scarenth shot back. The chamber erupted in arguments, where aliens shouted in dozens of languages, their translators creating a cacophony of overlapping voices. Pyrith whimpered and grabbed Jake's hand. The child's scales were growing warmer, a sign of stress. Jake knelt down and whispered, "It's okay. They're just talking. Nobody's going to hurt you." Pyrith looked at him with those golden eyes and gradually calmed. The simple interaction was noticed by everyone in the chamber. The shouting died down as aliens watched a human comforting a Dracoth child with ease, something that should have been impossible. Counselors, Linda stood from her seat, her voice cutting through the lingering arguments. May I speak as an expert witness? Illuminar considered, then nodded. Dr. Hayes, you may address the council. Linda made her way to the central platform, carrying her datapad. I've spent the last 4 days studying the interaction between Jake Morrison and Pyrith. I've also reviewed all available literature on Dracoth child development. What I've found is remarkable. She activated a holographic display showing brain scans and energy readings. Dracoth children possess immense psionic power, but they lack the neural development to control it. The power responds to their emotional state, specifically to fear and perceived threats. When a Dracoth child encounters a typical psionic species, the child's developing mind is overwhelmed by the mental noise, the thoughts, and emotions broadcasting from the other being. This triggers a fear response, which triggers the psionic attack. We know this already, Rixtal said impatiently. But here's what you don't know, Linda continued. You humans register as essentially blank on the psionic spectrum. When Pyrith looks at Jake mentally, there's no noise, no threatening thoughts, no overwhelming input. Just quiet. For a Dracoth child, this is incredibly soothing. It's like the mental equivalent of a dark, quiet room after being in a loud, bright stadium. She pulled up more data. Furthermore, human emotional communication is primarily physical and verbal, not mental. When Jake shows affection or concern, he does it through touch, tone of voice, and facial expressions. Things Pyrith can understand and respond to without being overwhelmed. Karen Phillips stood as well. If I may add to Dr. Hayes' points, I've observed Jake and Pyrith's interactions from a developmental psychology perspective. What I've seen is a healthy attachment forming. Our Pyrith shows all the signs of a secure bond, seeking proximity to Jake when stressed, using him as a safe base for exploration and showing distress when separated. This is exactly what we want to see in child development. Or it could be unhealthy dependence, Rixtal argued. The child becomes attached to something that cannot truly understand its needs. Jake understands Pyrath's needs better than you think, Karen replied. Children's needs are universal across species. Safety, comfort, engagement, boundaries, affection. Jake provides all of these naturally. A new voice spoke up, deep and rumbling. Jake turned to see another Dracoth standing in the high balcony section. This one was even larger than Scarinth, with scales that were almost black and scars crossing its face. I am Krethus, a elder of the Dracoth Conclave, the creature announced. I have lived for 400 of your years. I have seen many things, but never have I seen one of our young so content with an outsider. This human's presence has given me something I had not felt in decades. Hope. Hope is not evidence, Rixtal insisted. Then let us gather evidence, Krethus replied. Lord Scarinth proposes a 6-month trial under strict supervision. I support this proposal with conditions. The human and child will remain on Vayara 7. They will be monitored constantly. Medical and psychological evaluations will occur weekly. Any sign of distress or danger, and the trial ends immediately. And if something goes wrong, the collective asked, if the child loses control and kills people? Then I personally will accept responsibility, Scarinth said firmly. Almost the blame will fall on me, not on humanity. But I do not believe that will happen. I have watched Jake with my child. I have seen what you all have seen. This is not a fluke or an accident. This is a genuine connection. Illuminar was silent for a long moment, light refracting through its crystalline body in complex patterns. This council must vote. But first, I would hear from the human himself. Jake Morrison, why should we allow this experiment? Jake stood, suddenly aware that hundreds of eyes were on him. He wasn't a public speaker, he wasn't a diplomat or a scientist. He was just a guy who had grabbed a kid to keep them from getting hurt. I don't have fancy arguments, he said honestly. I just know that Pyrath is a good kid who deserves a chance to have a normal childhood. And if I can help with that, I want to. It's that simple. Nothing is simple in galactic politics, Rixtal said. Maybe that's the problem, Jake replied. Maybe sometimes we make things too complicated. A kid needed help. I helped. Now that kid needs someone to care about them. I'm volunteering. Everything else is just details. Pyrath chirped and leaned against Jake's leg, and he rested his hand on the child's head without thinking about it. The vote was called. It took 2 hours of deliberation and multiple recounts. In the end, the decision passed by the narrowest of margins. Jake had 6 months to prove that humans and Dracoth children could coexist safely. The real work was about to begin. The first month was harder than Jake had expected. The council provided him with a large suite of rooms in a secure section of Vayara 7. It's equipped with everything a Dracoth child might need. There were heat lamps for basking, fireproof cushions for sleeping, and specialized food that smelled like burning rubber but that Pyrath loved. Karen Phillips visited daily, observing and taking notes. Chris Baker stood guard outside, though he admitted he wasn't sure what he was guarding against. Linda spent most of her time analyzing data and writing reports for the council. Pyrath was curious about everything. The child wanted to touch every surface, investigate every sound, and ask questions about things Jake had no idea how to explain. Why was the floor flat? Where did the lights come from? What were stars made of? Jake did his best, often making up answers that Karen later had to gently correct. But there were difficult moments too. Pyrath had nightmares, waking up shrieking in the night with small flames shooting from its mouth. The first time it happened, Jake had rushed in to find the child huddled in a corner, terrified and confused. It took an hour of gentle talking before Pyrath calmed down enough to sleep again. It's normal, Karen explained the next morning. Children process trauma through dreams. Pyrath almost died in that explosion. The child's mind is working through it. How do I help? Jake asked, exhausted from lack of sleep. Exactly what you're doing. Be present. Be patient. Let Pyrath know they're safe. The nightmares continued for 2 weeks before gradually fading. But just as that problem resolved, another appeared. Pyrath's psionic abilities began manifesting in new ways. Objects would float when the child got excited, yet temperatures in the room would spike when Pyrath was angry. Once, during a tantrum about bedtime, every light in the suite shattered simultaneously. Jake called Scarinth in a panic. "I don't know how to handle this. I don't have mental powers. I can't teach Pyrath control." "You don't need mental powers," Scarinth said calmly. "You need patience and consistency. When Pyrath loses control, what do? I stay calm. I talk quietly. I wait for it to pass." "Exactly. You model emotional regulation. Pyrath learns by watching you. The child sees that anger and frustration don't have to be overwhelming, that they pass like storms. This is more valuable than any psionic training." Still, the council grew nervous. Rixtal filed 3 formal complaints in the first month alone, citing each incident as proof that the experiment was too dangerous. Illuminar visited personally to inspect the damage from the shattered lights. "This is concerning," the crystalline being said, examining the broken glass. "Pyrath is 4 years old," Jake replied, sweeping up the mess. 4-year-olds have tantrums. Human kids break things too. They just don't do it with their minds. Human children cannot kill with their tantrums. Pyrath didn't kill anyone. The kid broke some lights. We'll get better at managing it." But privately, Jake was worried. What if the council was right? What if he was in over his head? The breakthrough came in the second month. Karen had suggested introducing Pyrath to other children, carefully controlled interactions to help with social development. The council grudgingly approved, and they arranged for 3 alien children to visit: a young Mytharian who breathed ammonia through a specialized suit, a crystalline child who looked like a small prism, and a human girl named Sophie, whose parents worked on the station. Jake was nervous as the children arrived. Pyrath hid behind his legs, peeking out at the newcomers with obvious anxiety. "It's okay," Jake said softly. "They're here to play with you." Sophie stepped forward first. She was 6 years old, fearless, and carrying a worn stuffed animal. "Hi, I'm Sophie. Want to see my bear?" Pyrath emerged slowly, fascinated by the fuzzy toy. The children sat down together, and within minutes they were playing a simple game of passing the bear back and forth. The Mytharian child joined in, followed by the crystalline child who made the bear glow with refracted light. Karen filmed everything, tears in her eyes. "This is beautiful," she whispered to Jake. "Dracoth children never get to do this. Never." The playdate lasted an hour. When the other children left, Pyrath was exhausted but happy. That night, there were no nightmares. Regular playdates became part of the routine. Pyrath learned to share, to take turns, to navigate the small conflicts that arise when children play together. More importantly, Pyrath learned that other beings weren't threats. The child's psionic outbursts decreased dramatically. By the 4th month, Jake had developed a daily routine that worked. Mornings were for lessons, simple things like colors and numbers and learning to read Dracoth script. Afternoons were for play, either with other children or exploring safe parts of the station with Jake as a guide. Evenings were quiet time, stories, and gentle conversation before sleep. Scarinth visited often, marveling at his child's progress. Pyrath speaks in full sentences now, uses words I've never heard from a child this young. The isolation truly was damaging them. "Pyrath is smart," Jake said. "Just needed a chance to show it." But not everyone was happy with the progress. Rixtal's opposition grew more intense. During the 4th month evaluation, the Vexari representative presented evidence of what he called suspicious activity. "The human is too close to the child," Rixtal argued before the council. "The attachment is unhealthy. The child shows signs of distress when separated from Morrison even briefly. This is not healthy development. This is dependency." "That's called attachment," Karen countered. "Why, it's normal and necessary for child development. Pyrath needs a secure base, someone to rely on. That's how children learn to eventually become independent. Or it's how they learn they cannot survive without their captor," Rixtal said coldly. The accusation stung. Jake sat in the observation room, listening to himself being called a captor, watching council members nod along with Rixtal's arguments. Then Pyrath did something unexpected. The child had been sitting quietly during the hearing, required to attend as the subject of discussion. But when Rixtal called Jake a captor, Pyrath stood up. "No," the child said clearly. "Jake is not a captor. Jake is family." The chamber went silent. "Pyrath, sit down," Scarinth said gently. "No," Pyrath repeated. "Everyone keeps saying bad things about Jake. But Jake saved me. Jake takes care of me. Jake teaches me and plays with me and makes sure I'm not scared. That's not a captor. That's what family does." Small flames flickered around Pyrath's scales, not from anger but from passionate emotion. The temperature in the chamber rose. "You see," Rixtal said triumphantly, "the child is losing control. The human's influence is making it unstable." "I'm not unstable," Pyrath said, and the flames extinguished. The child took a deep breath, just like Jake had taught during calming exercises. "I'm just upset, but I can control it. Jake taught me how." The demonstration was more powerful than any report or argument. A 4-year-old Dracoth child, feeling strong emotions, had chosen to regulate rather than explode. Yes, something that normally took years of isolated training had been learned in 4 months through simple human parenting techniques. Even Illuminar seemed impressed. "The child has made remarkable progress." "The child has been indoctrinated," Rixtal insisted, but his voice had lost its conviction. The council voted to continue the experiment for the remaining 2 months. But something had shifted. What had started as a controversial trial was becoming something else. Proof that change was possible. Jake hugged Pyrath after the hearing. "That was very brave," he said. "You're brave every day," Pyrath replied. "You help me even when it's scary. I wanted to help you too." In that moment, Jake realized that this wasn't just about proving humans could care for Dracoth children. It was about family, formed not through biology but through choice and commitment and love. The final 2 months passed quickly, filled with learning and growth and occasional setbacks. When the 6-month mark arrived, the council conducted its final evaluation. The results were undeniable. Pyrath was healthier, happier, and more developed than any Dracoth child in recorded history at this age.